Hey everybody, Bernie Gallerani here. As many of you guys know, I've been a real estate agent for over 20 years, and a lot of the topics, knowledge, any level of success that we've had has all come from real estate. But what I think is important about this particular podcast is that we want to go deep into the root of why somebody became somebody and how they excelled and succeeded at a high level based on a little bit of their story, where that came from. We think that that's going to help a lot of people out there who are having very similar issues in life where they just have a hard time moving forward. And so we've created this great podcast called Success is Not Convenient. And I've always, and for many, many years, have always said success is not convenient. And what that means is it never really lines up with what you're doing right now. Success has a different set of plans. It runs by a different set of rules. And so what we have found in the real estate business or in business in general, that when people get into the business, they want to do it their way, especially realtors, right? They want to have a flexible schedule. And what we've never found is that's never successful. We will have a failure rate on that constantly if we continue to believe that way. So what I did is I've invited a guest today to launch this Success is Not Convenient podcast with my good friend, Kim Musgrave. So thank you, Kim, for joining. We've been friends a long time, haven't we?
Yeah, we sure have.
Let's say 20 years, I think, right?
Yeah, about 20 years.
It's fun because you have such an interesting place in my heart, because before I ever sold one house, I'd only been in the business, I think, maybe 6 weeks. And I got a chance to meet you up in Ohio, I think it was,
Yeah,
right?
and I remember saying, with the name Bernie, I thought you would be old. And that was like
Well, it's
20
kind of
years ago.
it's kind of an older person's name.
Uh-huh. And you just laughed.
Well, I had to grow up with the name my whole life. So
Yeah.
guess what? It was old when I was young. So it's still
Yeah.
an old name. But
Yeah.
and it's been a fun journey knowing you for 20 years and getting the opportunity to learn a little bit about you.
Mm-hmm.
Now I know obviously you're in Paducah, Kentucky. Obviously you're running a real estate team there, right?
Yes.
How many units are you guys selling now?
150. We've been up to 200, but we've lost some team members. So last year we were at 150, and we'll probably hit about 150 this year.
Okay, good,
Yeah.
good. So you're building a team. We're an individual agent. So you've had a lot of success, obviously, in your real estate career, because having 150 sales is never easy, right? I mean, and so I know I've talked with you for many years about, and Kim and I have been friends forever. So in lots of conversations around team building, and I always said it's the hardest thing you'll ever do, right?
Yeah.
Would you agree?
It's pretty difficult.
Because you were selling 60, 70 homes by yourself, right? And then now you're team building.
Yeah, the most I sold was 97, but most years I'd stayed 60 to 70.
60 to 70.
Yes.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
So you're selling, let's call it 100, right? Selling 100 houses. Team building's a different challenge though, right?
It's very challenging.
Yeah. You kind of got to dig way down deep to kind of learn a little bit of things about resilience and things. So let's open this up a little bit to kind of how you started. You grew up in Paducah?
I grew up in Fairfield, Illinois, which is close to St. Louis, Missouri, and probably 2 hours from Paducah, Kentucky. So.
Okay. How'd you end up in Paducah?
My stepfather was a chiropractor, and he found it when the internet was just starting, and he found that area to be a chiropractor. And so he passed away, and when he passed away, I went to move to be closer to my mother.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, good. And what age were you then?
I was 18, and then I got in real estate when I was 19.
19. So you've been in it a long time.
I've been in real estate a long
How many
time.
years?
31 years.
Jeez. I mean, that's a long time.
All I've done is wait tables and sell real estate.
Wait, so did you wait tables when you started selling real estate? Is that what?
The first 2 years I had to sell real estate I had to wait tables just to kind of support myself.
So talk a little bit about, obviously you have to have a lot of resilience to be a real estate agent that produces 90 or so sales a year. Take us back, way back to your life, in that where in your life you learned to have so much resilience. Walk us back to where you think you had your most struggles, but you learned the most in.
I'd say just my childhood overall was extremely tumultuous, and lots of abuse, lots of violence, an alcoholic father, I had a really, really dark childhood. So it took me a lot of years to get past that. And, now I'm grateful for it, because there's nothing in my life that's going to be as hard as, what my childhood was. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you had alcoholic abuse in there. You had physical abuse in there
and sexual abuse.
and sexual abuse. Okay. Wow. So when you look at your life today and you look at those experiences that you had, what has it taught you as maybe as an adult owning a company, right? Being a single woman, running a business, having employees, running agents. You own a bunch of rental properties also, right?
Yes, I do.
So you've done well there. How has those experiences maybe helped you as a business owner today?
I know that if I keep going, I'm going to get there. I think that's, I think that resiliency is that I didn't realize that being someone that's extremely resilient is a rare quality, and now I can see that it's a pretty rare quality to be someone that can just get knocked down and always get back up.
Where do you think you get that from?
I think my childhood definitely helped because I had to get back up. And then I've had so many great people in Mike Ferry's system where I've watched them, fall down and get back up. So I've had a lot of people I've looked up to.
That's pretty normal though, wouldn't you say that most successful people have been pretty much knocked down, dragged down, stepped on? I mean, is that
it seems to be a quality within every successful person I've met.
Yeah.
And people would never dream what you've been through, because most people that are successful, you're never going to guess the darkness they've been through in their life.
It's so interesting, I think, that, and I've heard Mike Ferry say this, where someone called him and talked about him being an overnight success. And he says, yeah, it took 25 years to be an overnight success.
Yeah.
Isn't it true that, as people see individuals at a higher level of success, that they think it just happened like this, but they don't realize the dark side of that?
Yeah, they didn't realize, and how much work really went into it.
Well, do you find at all that the drive that you had to be successful came from certain instances in your childhood where you were proving yourself maybe to others because of maybe how you felt about yourself potentially?
Yeah, and it might be a little dark, but I had an aunt that told me I was going to end up in prison or on welfare, and that was a driver for a long time because I wanted to prove to her that I knew I wasn't going to be on welfare, because as a little kid I went out and door knocked and sold balls door to door, so I knew I was never going to be poor, but prison maybe. So I just wanted to prove to her that I was going to be successful. Yeah. So when other people might have went home at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I kept working till 6 or 7.
Now, you said you were selling balls. Tell me what that is, because I've never heard of that. I've never seen a ball salesman at my door.
Plastic balls, the real that you blow up. They're plastic balls, and I buy them for 50 cents, and I sell them for $1.
Like you'd go to the store and buy them for 50 cents?
I bought them wholesale, and I went door to door selling them, and I didn't come home till I sold every one of them. And then I'd go buy more. And
I so love that story.
Yeah.
You know what's a fun story, Kim? I've never actually told this story, I don't think, so it'll be fun. I was probably 23 or 4, I could guess. And I went to these local restaurants, because I live in LA, went to these local restaurants like a Subway and a Mexican restaurant, whatever, and I'd get 15 or 20 different restaurants, and then I would put together this buy one, get one free card. And then I went to this organization, which was a nonprofit, and I said, hey, I want to have you sponsor mine. I'll give you 10% of my earnings. And so they said, okay. So then I can go to the door and I can say, hey, listen, I'm working, doing these buy one, get one cards, and 10% of this is going to, serve this particular organization. And during that particular time, AIDS was a big thing, right? This is back in the 80s and early 90s, I guess, maybe more so like early 90s. And so AIDS was the big thing. And so I was helping raise some money for this organization. And I'd go door to door and I'd sell these little discount cards in this little community of Burbank, California. So I can appreciate what you're saying. So I created something out of nothing, put these little cards, laminated the cards. I mean, it was quite a production. Mm-hmm. So I appreciate your innovativeness in that. So how long did you do that?
Until my supplier ran out, so probably 6 months.
Sound like a drug dealer. My supplier ran out. My ball supplier
ran out. My mom had been dating this guy. That's where I was getting my balls. So when he broke up, I didn't have anything to sell anymore.
So the boyfriend went away, and so did your ball supplier.
Yeah, they were my business. Yeah,
They're in your business. So you had to recreate.
I had to. Yeah,
And so how old were you at that time when that was going
probably
down?
about 10.
About 10.
And I dragged my 8-year-old sister along with me.
Well, I mean, you can't say no to a little girl selling blow-up balls. I mean,
Yeah.
how do you turn that down?
No, I got a lot of yeses.
I used to think this. It was really funny. My kids would sell Girl Scouts, right? And I'd go with them because they were young, when they sell Girl Scout cookies. And they'd knock on doors and they'd go, oh, well, I already bought a box of Girl Scout cookies from somebody who came here the other day. I'm like, they're $2.50. Give my kid $2.50 and let him sell a box of cookies, right? So people have a hard time saying no to kids. But well, that's interesting. So you had this early salesman kind of process.
Yeah.
However, I know that you were pretty fearful to talk to people.
Yeah.
So let's go there. Because you had this young knocking on doors, selling this product, making a few bucks.
Yeah.
And then did you kind of revert, or would you always have that fear when you were 10?
I don't remember what I felt like when I was 10, but I do remember when I got to the office, and it was, but back now they'd probably say, I'm guessing if you started a new real estate company, it's go watch YouTube. Back then we didn't have YouTube, so they said go knock on doors. And I remember sitting in my car for a good 30 minutes, and I would break out in like hives, and I was just so scared, but I made myself do it. And, now I would love to go out and knock on doors. That would be a fun activity.
Yeah.
But I just always pushed myself through I kept pushing myself through those fears because I was scared of everything and in the Mike Ferry system.
Were you that way before, though, in other things, or was it just within MFO that you had that challenge? Just the things they were asking you to do that were new?
I was
And
scared
unfamiliar?
of a lot of things. Like if I had to go and talk to the tax office, I remember breaking out in hives, phoning a coach. I had to go in and pay talk to the tax office, county tax office. So I was really, really fearful for a lot of years over lots of things.
Where did that fear come from, though?
It was. I had an experience where I had some extremely traumatizing experiences. Like I really had someone who tortured me. And that is where a lot of it came. And so the experience wasn't that bad. It happened in a moment and then it was over. But what was so bad is I carried it in my mind for a couple decades. And that's what was bad, that I allowed that fear and that to be in my mind, which now if I have any fear, I work on it immediately. Yeah. And I phone somebody or I phone a coach and I get through it. But that's because I know that that's what's going to take me to be the most powerful version of myself.
Yeah, well, that's good. So it didn't just change. You had to continue to keep working on that.
Yeah.
Had you not worked on that, where do you think your business would be today, right? Because a lot of people, I think, that can resonate to this, that's watching this video, can say, hey, I have very similar fears in my life. I can't get over it. So what recommendations would you make for people that are struggling with that?
Well, I started Overcoming Fear Journal, and I started writing down everything I was afraid of, and then I would go do that. And then I worked with a coach that helped me with that. So this is my next one. Mm-hmm. And, I just kept doing that. And then really honestly, eventually I developed a relationship with a higher power, and that helped me tremendously.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah.
So looking at your business then today, you got in the real estate business. You, as we all know, being coached by MFO, highly promoted to call expireds, call for sale by owners, knocking on those particular doors in both those categories, calling or knocking on in and around sales doors, or calling in and around sales. The first year sounds like it was pretty brutal emotionally to do all of those things.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
How long did it take you before you started going, okay, I think I'm comfortable with calling people that I don't know and feeling judged, right? That's really what it comes down to. Like, you feel like you're being judged by them, right? How long did it take?
I joined Mike Ferry in 1998. That's a really great question. I don't know the answer to that. Yeah, that's
How long do you think you carried that level of stress?
10, 15 years.
Wow.
A long time. I just kept doing it even though I was scared. Yeah.
You know what I love about you is that you're always searching for ways to improve.
Yeah.
Because you've been involved with all sorts of different courses and things to try to get this right? You've never given up. Looking at your moving forward, your future, right? You've tackled a lot of these obstacles in your life. what still lingers? What still comes in, creeps in on you, even though you're fighting it? You're right. You've done a really good job. You've obviously made a whole bunch of money. You're probably the most successful person in your family, I would guess.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Yeah.
Okay. So you've surpassed your environment, okay? Because we always talk about like you're a product of your environment. So you were a product of your environment. You just pushed through that.
Yeah, absolutely.
What still creeps in from back in the day that sometimes shows itself?
There's absolutely nothing that creeps in from my childhood. Like none of that. Like none of that matters. I don't have any attachment to that. What creeps in is the things that happened in the last 30 days. That's what creeps in. And then I have to be, like one of the things that I say is my past does not dictate my future. I dictate my future when that comes in. Because, I'll start to get scared that my agents are going to leave. Well, that's just because I had that in the past. It's not what's happening now. So that's the last thing that I worked on is just that because
it's interesting. Do you feel? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off,
no.
but you just said something. Have you had that feeling of people leaving you throughout your life that you think that's a connection to your self-worth? Like, do you think that that's the fear and maybe what happened as a young child that you have this abandonment thought process?
Yeah, and I've read somewhere or heard somewhere that people that build teams often have abandonment issues, which would make sense because there's someone always leaving. Or you're firing someone always. So
yeah, I mean, sometimes I curl up with a pillow and a little blanket and cry myself to sleep on a regular night, because it is hard. It's I've said to many people who I've talked to about team building, and as you well know, a lot of agents around the country will call and say, hey, you got a really large team and you're building this organization. And the first thing I say is, it is not what you think it is. It's much more difficult than you'll ever imagine. It sounds like fun and glorious, and yet you'll probably work 10 times harder because managing people is a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember, when I decided to build a team, I just couldn't, I couldn't ever guess, how hard it's going to be, and also the things I was going to have to overcome to build a team.
What's been the hardest thing for you in building a team that you've had the hardest part grasping or putting your mind around?
I guess, being a Mike Ferry agent, we paid a lot of money for people to hold us accountable. And a lot of agents don't want that accountability. And that's hard for me to grasp because we were willing to pay so much for accountability.
So you've been in for 30 years? Is that right?
31,
And how long with Mike?
1998, yeah.
So what is that? 27 years.
Yeah.
Okay. Have you ever calculated between your coaching fees, which I know how much those are, your travel expenses to all these events, all of these things that you've done to improve your mindset? Because I know you've traveled a lot to a lot of different places around the world to work on what's going on up here, right? How much do you think, if you were just to spitball an idea of cost, how much have you invested in yourself through these programs that you've worked on to improve your life? How much do you think you've spent on that?
Before this year, I was at about $300,000, and that's just for the coaching and seminars. And then this year, I'm paying $75,000 for a coach, so that's definitely jumped it up. And then I'm guessing just as much for the travel. I mean, because next week I'm going to Costa Rica, and then I'm going to Puerto Rico in July and in August.
So for mindset coaching stuff.
Coaching.
Okay, cool. So would you say 300, let's say in coaching, and another 300 or 400 in traveling and having other experiences outside of just coaching fees?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's so interesting. And what I would say based on all of that, because I've traveled around to a lot of masterminds, been involved with a lot of different things. And I'd probably say I'm probably at 600,000 or 700,000 in self-improvement processes where, it's interesting. People don't really understand. You don't learn all this stuff for free.
No.
You have to pay somebody or some people or some organizations to be surrounded by other people like us, right? I mean, it's a little bit of a fish out of water, aren't we? Like when we act the way we act and we do the things we do and the money that we earn is unnormal for what most people experience. We have to go outside of that to seek it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
What do you think you've learned most about yourself hanging out with these high producing people?
What I love about the friends that I have is, we're all of us are always pushing ourselves to do more, and we're always pushing ourselves for the growth. And like you called your friend out, we're all really good about calling each other out if needed.
Yeah.
In different areas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't that our job though? If somebody's not acting as if we see them or we feel they should and they're our friend,
Yeah.
and we know them one way and they get a little squirrely, isn't that our job though, to call them out and try to get them back
Yeah.
in line with what they are truly about?
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime I've been called out, I could see it immediately. And anytime I've called out a friend that was, a high producer, they've always said, "Oh, wow," and "thank you." They've always thanked me for saying, "Hey, you need to," whatever the issue might be.
I'm gonna tell the story about the time you called me, and it was a Friday morning, I think it was.
And I called you over and over and over.
Yeah,
I
you
better
called me.
answer this one.
Yeah. And so Kim calls me and she says, she's calling me over and over again. I think I was at a breakfast or something with a Bible study that I was in. And so I had to got in the car and you told me that, well, no, actually, let me back up. You actually called me a day or two before and you had asked me because your broker was basically telling you can't call expireds or buy own or something,
I
right?
was in trouble for everything. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was a little like that with my broker. He respected me, I think, enough that he kind of left me alone, but I'm not sure he really liked me doing the things that I was doing, calling expireds and buy owners. So you had said to me that my broker was basically telling you not to do that.
Yeah.
Right? Is that right? Like,
yeah, and like if you have a team, then you have someone put a door hanger here, and they shouldn't have done that, and so then there's this list of all the things you've done wrong. And so that was kind of what was going on.
Yeah, and so Kim calls me and she tells me the story about how her broker is basically giving you an ultimatum, like stop doing that, right?
Yeah.
And then of course I told Kim to give him an ultimatum. And so as a good coachable person that you are, you're like, okay, well, Bernie told me I should go do this. Well, anyways, on this Friday, because my great advice kind of backfired a little bit on you and probably on me a little bit, but I call her back and I say, what's up? And you said?
I said, you told me that I need to go in and be really strong with my broker. And when I got done, I felt like I hadn't been quite strong enough. But then that night I got an email saying I was no longer part of the brokerage and I had 30 days to get out. So
your broker fired you?
I got fired. Thanks, Bernie.
Well, I think that's what Kim said is you basically, you got me fired. Those were your words, but I'm like, like, okay, well, my advice kind of backfired, but then what did I say? When you told me that your broker fired you.
This is really great.
I said, this is excellent.
This is excellent. Yeah, this is excellent. We went through a few scenarios, and I said, I think I'm going to go see if I can get 2 months to get out and go home and get my broker's license and start my own. And so I'm pretty good at negotiation. So I went in, I got a second month, and I went home. I got my broker's license in 2 months. All I did was go on listing appointments, didn't prospect any, and I got my broker's license.
What's fun? What's great about Kim's story is no matter what our intentions are, sometimes they turn out differently. My goal was there's no way this broker is going to get rid of you because you're his best agent in his whole company. Well, I was wrong. Of course, the broker got rid of you. But then I was like, well, what are you going to do now, right? You're going to make lemonade out of lemons, right? So you look at this, go, great, congratulations. You now can go open your own brokerage firm. Mm-hmm. And that's what you did.
Yeah.
Now watch this for everyone who's paying attention. Worst thing that happened to you or best thing that ever happened to you?
I love having my own brokerage. I love it.
Yeah. And so it took the broker to say, you're gone. Yeah. For you then to go through the fire, the difficult time, the listing properties, the going to study for your broker's license, the, oh crap, what am I going to do now, right? Tell me about where your mind was at that time walking through all of that.
Well, and I was looking at this, I was like, oh crap, what I'm going to do now? And I thought, I've got a lot of classes I got to do in a short amount of time. And at that point, I'd already started realizing that resiliency was my strength. And I thought, I'm kind of average intelligence, but I think I can pass my brokerage in 2 months. And so I started playing the Rocky song over and over. And I thought, okay, I'm going to do this. And I really got in a mindset of, my backup plan is I was going to have to find a broker to hold my license until I got my brokerage. But I thought my broker, his core, like his identity was being the nice guy. So I thought I might even have a little room there. But I went and got my broker's license really quickly, and it did increase my confidence that I can do really hard things in a really short amount of time.
You know, as I've gotten to know you over the years, especially since you've been team building, I'm like, man, this girl, she just will never say die.
Yeah.
Like, and you've been through several operations managers, and you bring a new face in here all the time. Like, who's this one? Oh, this is my new house manager. It's like, okay, Kim, how many have you had? But you know what? Until you get it right, you got to keep. You got to keep doing it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Is that kind of your idea? It's like, it's not that the business doesn't work. It's just you haven't found the right formula yet.
Well, and I love the fact that you were talking about that billionaire, because here he worked for all these years and didn't make money, and that's how I was in real estate.
Yeah.
A lot of years I wasn't making. I was in a very low price point, and I was paying Mike Ferry $1,000 a month, but I wasn't making a lot of money.
Yeah.
But then one day I woke up and I was making a lot of money.
Yeah.
And then I feel like the team building will eventually be like that. I'll wake up and be like really amazing at building a team. Now I hope it's this year.
But if not, there's always 2026.
But if not, there's 2026.
That's what I love so much about this with you. There is no quit. There's only keep pushing until.
Yeah.
Right? It's like quitting is never an option. I mean, you've been down and out your entire life based on alcoholism, abuse, all sorts of things that you shared with me that we won't talk about today.
Yeah.
But you have had a really tumultuous life as a child, and you became this, because we can play this two ways, right? When we grow up, because I obviously grew up. I grew up in HUD housing, in my life, right, too. So I'm not sure my life was like yours. I wasn't physically abused or anything like that, but I had my own personal abuse just based on how I was raised. I was raised in a rich town, but I was a poor kid. So I think that was a blessing in that, though, for me, right? Is that
absolutely.
I faked it like I was rich, but I lived in a HUD housing complex. I mean, I would actually really even tell people like, oh no, it's my mom has a condo down the street. Well, it was a HUD building that we lived in with subsidized rent control. But all the things that you've gone through. If you look back at all of those things, had you not gone through all of those things, how much more do you think it impacted you having gone through that versus had you not gone through that?
Yeah, probably. Like, I remember one of my first jobs when I was a teenager, I was working at a bakery, and my dad was like, if you just stay there, I know you'll be the store manager. And if my life had been normal, I would have probably just had a normal life. But I did have something to prove to people and to myself, like Mike Ferry's system. It wasn't just that you get to learn how to sell real estate. There's also a lot of self-development within that, because if you're going to go out and list properties at a high level, you have to really, overcome a lot.
Yeah, but just even being disciplined to be an independent contractor, like you think,
Yes,
right?
Yes, and I didn't realize that, because showing up and working every day was something that came fairly easy for me. And now building a team, I'm like, it blows my mind how hard it is for people to show up and work every day.
Well, that was probably my big aha too, Kim, in that we were cut from a different cloth where putting in 12 hours a day, 6 or 7 days a week was not an uncommon thing when you're starting a real estate business.
Yeah.
And yet we have a hard time finding anybody near that puts that into their business today.
Yeah.
So what's your solution to that? How do you lower your standards and how you think about people, or do you just continue to keep trying to find the people that want to put in that time to make it work?
That's an excellent question. And when I had high standards on my team, I would average two transactions per agent, and
Per month.
2 transactions per agent per month.
Yeah.
So I had really high. That's pretty high production.
Yeah, that's 24 a year.
New
That's
agents.
excellent.
So when I lowered my standards and said, okay, because I couldn't keep agents, so I was like, okay, I'm going to lower my standards because this is too hard for people. Then I average one house per agent per month. So that's not going to work. So now I'm revamping my standards and putting them in place. And then I've just got to find people that are willing to, pay the price for success. And I think part of it is I want to help people. Maybe if they weren't making a lot of money, I would want to take them, and I knew they could do it. But I've got to find people that have goals and dreams and are willing to push when it is hard and willing to stay when it's tough. Because it's one thing to make the money, but it's another thing to keep in production.
What's interesting in what she's saying here, and I love it, in that, and I have a different problem, and I'll explain to you why. Like, your issue is you live in a very small market, so your pool of agents are pretty small.
Yes.
Right. Mike Ferry shared something with me, and I'll just share it with you because you might find some value in this. And we were talking about, because I live in a small town here. I work in a big town, which is Nashville, but I live in a small suburb, obviously, about 20 miles or so outside of Nashville. So, but Mike said to me something. He goes, when you have small town people, or you live in a small town, the people can have small town thinking. And there's a lot that goes with that. And so what Mike shared with me is you have to go outside into the big city and get more exposure into things in the city that are not available to you in your small town. In your case, you don't really have a big city that's close by, right, in Paducah. So your population of realtors are small, and you live in a small town, which goes along with that process of thinking. So how do you find those people in for me, I can just keep recruiting. I got 15,000 realtors or 14,000 realtors in my surrounding metropolitan area. You have how many in your area?
300 or 400.
300 or 400.
Yeah.
So to try to find this needle in a haystack of somebody that really wants to dedicate their business to being committed as you were, how tough is that?
It is, and I think, there's two things that you touched on, but, like we were talking today, we may go to restaurants, we may go out to stores and, realize that anybody could actually be somebody we could recruit instead of just looking at the realtors. And then I like what you said because about, growing your mindset and growing the amount of abundance that you can have, because those first 2 years I started team building, I come here every Friday. And I had saved up for a luxury vehicle for a long time. But I kept thinking, I can buy a rental property for this. And I couldn't allow myself to have it. And then one day, Kylie, your daughter, comes in driving a luxury vehicle. And I thought, she's only like 27. And I'm so much older than her.
Yeah.
If she's going to allow herself to have that, I'm going to allow myself to have it.
Yeah.
So just being around. And then other days, your agents were talking about buying $8,000 mattresses. No one in Paducah, Kentucky is talking about buying $8,000 mattresses. So being here definitely helps me increase my mindset for allowing more abundance in my life.
Well, and it's fun because what Mike has taught me about exposing myself to bigger thinkers, and it gets you start to understand, like, when I bought my very first expensive car, I'll just say that, my wife Wendy was saying, gosh, what are people going to say about seeing you drive that thing around this small little town kind of thing, right? And that goes with the small man town mentality. And so I called up Mike Ferry and I'm like, hey, Mike, I want to buy this car. There's Wendy's concerns. And here's what Mike says, and I love it. Mike says, well, you can afford it. I'm like, yeah. And he says, and you want it. I'm like, yeah. He says, doesn't matter what anybody else thinks about you. That's the problem. Don't ever worry about what anybody else thinks about you because you'll be held back if you worry about how everyone else thinks about you. So go do what you want to do and be a difference in other people's life because of how you think. Yeah. Right. And so, and I think I shared with you the struggle that I had even signing that paperwork and like going, man, this is a really big step for me because of where I live.
Yes.
Right. Now the town's grown a lot, so we're getting a lot more money coming into this little town we live in. But that's a challenge for people that live in towns like yours is how do you find people that think at a whole different level? It is really different when you get around the people we've been around and seeing the amount of success some of these people have had. And we try to bring this back to our little towns, we're odd.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're odd, right? And so a really good friend of mine recently said, well, you're the wealthiest guy I know. And I'm like, that's sad because I don't really have that much money in comparison to the people I know, right? I mean, I'm having conversations with billionaires at tables and, people worth hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. And I'm going, we need more friends. If I'm that person for you, you need more exposure, right? And that is, I think, the message for all of us is, it doesn't matter where we come from. It doesn't matter what happened to us as a child. It only matters how much we carry that into our adult life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you changed yourself.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? I haven't told my story, but I changed myself from who I was, but I used my experience as a young child and forced myself to take the good out of that and try to alleviate the bad. I still carry some of that luggage with me, right? That's hard to get rid of, but we have to keep working on improving ourselves, right? Because if we don't keep working on ourselves all the time, then we're just stuck in who we are at that moment.
Yeah, and I love how you would ask, who am I being? And I know in order to build a successful team, I'm going to have to be a different person. And so I will write out those characteristics and look at what I need to do to step into to that next person.
Yeah. This is fun. Let me ask you this before we let everybody go here. How many books do you think you've read in your lifetime?
I've really wondered that, because when I was in my 20s, I didn't have a television because I knew I had to do a lot of work. And I know I would easily read like 50 books a year. And now I don't read as many, but I'm listening to lots of podcasts. So now it's more probably like 20, because I'm always listening to a program, a podcast might vary.
So between podcast and / books, you're probably getting 50 to 100 exposures to how other people think.
Oh, yeah. Probably way more than that.
Favorite book that you can recommend that changed your being, meaning how you looked at yourself? Because there's probably a lot.
Yeah.
What do you think one that stands out for you?
Well, I like the one you recommend, Being the Solution. That was really good. I read that one 4 times.
Yeah.
Right now I'm reading A Changed Mind. I'm reading it for the 6th time. So
Wow, that's good. The Changed Mind. I've not read that one. I just got done reading The Banker's Code. You've read that one?
I haven't.
It's about how banks operate, and that's one. And then there's one I'm reading right now called Buy Back Your Time.
I like that one.
Have you read that one? And so I only mention this because I'll probably mention it on a lot of these, Kim, and that readers, because you don't have a higher education out of high school, correct?
No, just high school.
Just high school. So and same with myself. And so what happens is we have to self-educate, and it wasn't our just ability to grow up in a very difficult situation, but it was our ability to identify that if we're going to learn something significant, we're going to have to learn it from other people. We don't have formally higher educations, but it doesn't mean we're not smart people that have learned from a lot of smart people, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I love the training they did today, because it's not, people that are really smart are making changes. I loved them doing that today.
Yeah, that was a fun exercise. Well, Kim, thank you for joining me on this. And guys, listen, our goal here in these podcasts is to bring real life stories like Kim. There's so many people that have reached out to us through the videos that we've done in the years past that tell very similar stories as Kim's. And there's a lot of people out there struggling to move from where they were to where they have to go. Kim and I have been fortunate enough to have had very strong influences in our life where we'll never take the full credit for any of it, because it's really the contribution of all the hundreds and maybe thousands of people that we've had conversations with, books that we've read that have allowed us to navigate just enough to having a very abundant life. Yeah. So thank you for sharing your time with me and these people today. Guys, if you have any questions, you guys want to know more about Kim, where can they find you in Paducah? Is there like an email address if anybody has any questions?
Yeah, kimmusgraveworks@gmail.com.
Perfect. And we'll put that up on the screen for anybody that has any questions for you, Kim, if you're okay with that. And I just want to say, everybody, thank you. We look forward to bringing you these podcasts each and every week. And I hope everybody has an awesome day.